As you start your journey into blacksmithing, you've got your basic tools: forge, hammer, anvil. One of the first things you're going to encounter as you start to work on things is the need to cut material. Material generally doesn't come in pieces ideal for every project. Every project's going to be different. There's going to be lots of times you have to cut something. And even a piece relatively short in the grand scheme of things, I buy material in 20-foot pieces, is going to have to be cut somehow. Usually there's some form of cutting involved before you even start the project. Now, traditionally, that probably would have been done at the anvil with some sort of a cold chisel. Oftentimes that would be a hardy with a much blunter edge than a regular hot cut hardy, and that would cut cold material, especially when working in the wrought iron that was common at that time. And it's certainly a valid way to go even today. You can usually nick it maybe a third or halfway through, especially in smaller bar. This looks like it's 1/2-inch diameter bar, and you can get a cut that way. Working at the anvil, you don't need any specialized tools other than things that belong to the anvil. However, in most cases, a cold cut hardy is something you're going to have to make yourself. If you're just getting started, that might not be something you have available. My recommendation then for your very first cutting tool as a blacksmith is a hacksaw. The better the frame, the happier you're going to be with it. But even one bought for 50 cents or $1 from a garage sale is better than not having any way to cut material at all. The big thing would be to invest in decent blades. I like the Starrett blades, but any of the premium bimetal blades are pretty good. An 18 tooth per inch blade will probably do 90% of what you need in the blacksmith shop. So this is a really good way to start. It's best practice to take the time to file the burr off. Once you have the ability to cut material, if you can buy tool steels that are annealed so you can cut them with a hacksaw. Hardened tool steels don't want to cut with a hacksaw. One of the first tools I would make then as a blacksmith is a handheld hot cut chisel. This is really very simple. I'll link to a video up here talking about making a chisel like this. Might even be the video where we made this very same chisel. It's a very versatile tool. You can do a lot of different things with a hot cut chisel. Cutting hot, you can cut material to length. You can shear this off right at the edge of the anvil so you don't drive your chisel into your anvil, which would be bad for both of them. You can split it down the middle for decorative elements. A piece of sacrificial mild steel also helps protect your anvil and your chisel. Or you can just use it to create chisel lines as decorative elements to make something a little bit fancier. So if you're just getting started, the first project that I would make that would involve tool steels, hardening, and tempering would be a hot cut chisel. If your anvil has a relatively small hardy hole, making a hardy isn't that big a deal. But this anvil with the 1¼ inch hardy hole means I got to start with at least 1.5 inch square material. That is a huge amount of work to forge down a hardy shank that fits and get everything nice and even. You might be better off buying one. These are available new from all of the blacksmith suppliers like Blacksmith Supply, Blacksmith Depot, Pay Tool, places like that. But they're also available on the used market. You go someplace like eBay, you should be able to find a pretty affordable hot cut hardy. Unless you're just trying to be historically accurate, I probably wouldn't worry about a cold cut hardy. Even the one I use for hot cutting managed to cut that 1/2 inch bar cold, so it does serve some purpose. It'll just need sharpening a little more often if you're doing cold work with a hot cut hardy. A step up from a handheld chisel is one that can be held with your hand away from the work a little bit. And this one that goes in this pair of tongs is pretty nice for that. It's a good functional chisel and it will work in any direction, so you can take this and turn it 90 degrees if you want to cut this way, or you can work it this way. Just depends on what you want for your tool. A more traditional approach would be a wooden handle on a regular hot cut. And again, this is one I think we made here on the channel. I'll link to a video to it up here as well. And either one of these is ideal if you're working with a striker. I don't like the idea of holding a tool in my hand that a striker is going to hit. A lot of people do that, but it makes me really nervous. So I'd much rather have my hand away from the material and away from the heat zone by putting the tool on a handle. Now personally, I think I cut a straighter line with an inline handle than I do with the cross handle. But the cross handle at 90 degrees does keep your hand away from the heat better. Working under the treadle hammer, these things are wonderful. And this version you can even use under the power hammer, the K75, tools like that, very safely, and it's very effective. Now, of course, in a modern shop, if you have electricity available, that opens all sorts of doors in how you can cut material. A basic angle grinder, even the entry-level grinders that are corded are really useful. I like using battery-operated tools most of the time, but this is a much more affordable option. Buy a bunch of cut-off discs. Again, buy decent discs. They'll last a little bit longer and perform better. You can cut a whole lot of stuff with an angle grinder, and this will cut hardened steel. So if you're making your first hot cut out of something like an old coil spring, this will cut the coil spring without having to soften it first. Here again, it's best practice to take your time and get rid of the burr. I'm using a flap disc to do this. It's not the cutting disc I had on for the cutting part of this. Just one reason it's nice to have more than one angle grinder. Beyond that, you get into abrasive chop saws, which are really nice. They're bigger tools. They will do a lot of cutting fast. They do cost a bit in blades, and they make a lot of dust, a lot of noise. The newer carbide tooth cold saws are really nice, but again, a little more expensive. Blades are really expensive, but you don't have to replace them anywhere near as often as you do the abrasive blades. On the downside, the cold saws with the carbide teeth aren't really very good for hardened steels. That wears them out really fast. So you need to just save those for mild steel or fully annealed steel. I try to do all of my cutting of tool steels on the abrasive blade or with an angle grinder. And a final tool you might want for cutting in the blacksmith shop would be a bandsaw. Anything from a little handheld portable bandsaw that you could take out to your stock rack or work out in the driveway depending on your situation. Or like I do a lot of times, I have mine in a stand so that I can use it as a small benchtop vertical bandsaw. And I find that really useful for all sorts of things that I have to cut here in the blacksmith shop. Or you can get big stationary bandsaws. And if you're cutting up a lot of material to size, those can be really nice. A lot of them will self-feed, so you can set the material up, turn the saw on, and then you don't have to stand there and watch it. You can just let the saw slowly feed through the material until it cuts off. Then you can reset everything, do it all over again. And for big production work, that's really nice. In a small shop, you're working 1 or 2 hours on the weekend, a big stationary bandsaw is probably a pretty big luxury item. Now that's just a real quick overview of that fundamental blacksmithing skill of cutting, and includes things like splitting and some very basic decorative chisel work. You can get really involved with this. There are lots of other tools you can use: plasma cutters, torches, CNC controlled lasers, all sorts of stuff you can use for cutting materials. But if you're into that kind of stuff, you're probably beyond the fundamental stage in your blacksmithing career. Hope you found the video useful. I hope you have time in your day to get out to your shop, make something, but stay safe, wear your safety glasses. We'll see you for the next video.